Greetings, it is I, Titus Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on Vampire the Masquerade, describing the clans and bloodlines of the various types of vampires. Today, I have an interesting one for you. A bloodline of vampires, the Gargoyles, ones that were created artificially by the Tremere to be as their servitors. Now, they mastered the disciplines of fortitude, potence, and visertica, and have the ability to fly. Now, they are not a true bloodline of the Tremere. The Tremere artificially created them using thaumaturgic rituals and the blood of various other vampire clans, combining Gangrel, Nosferatu, and Simiche blood in order to create them in the first place. Gargoyles appear in three archetypes, which are actually combinations of major properties of each of the two of these bloodlines. That each, effectively, the combination of two of these comes up with this type of gargoyle. There are scouts, warriors, and sentinels. Since they have mostly broken free from the control of Tremere, they have actually evolved into their very own bloodline, and therefore effectively a bloodline of the Tremere at this point in time. Having broken free, of course, from the Tremere and their blood magic. Now, they were originally created in the Dark Ages, around 1167, though there is some debate about the exact date that the first gargoyle was created. Regardless, these original gargoyles were created through powerful thaumaturgic rituals, and many of the abilities they've gotten were granted through thaumaturgic rituals, so therefore they did not have a lot of abilities without them being granted to them by their Tremere masters. Scouts were created in order to observe the enemy and report back information based around their abilities of focusing on stealth and flight. Warriors were made to be the frontline soldiers of the Tremere's armies, basically battling against their enemies. Sentinels were created effectively to be house servants, to be house workers of the Tremere. They were made to look after and protect the master's haven, effectively being stationed there to not only guard it, but to actually do services within the haven that are needed. In the back half of the 15th century, though, the bulk of the Gargoyles liberated themselves from Tremere rule in what became known as the Gargoyle Revolt. This occurred, and this finally finished up right as about became the 1600s. This was kind of spurned on by a number of things. First off, that the Gargoyles were becoming more and more frustrated with their eternal servitude, especially with new ones being embraced rather than created through the thaumaturgic rituals. These new embraced ones were beginning to be more and more frustrated. Then there was rumors of those that had already kind of turned against their masters. There was a powerful gargoyle that was said to have escaped from his master when he was slain and gone off to live on its own. They finally took their chances to revolt against the Tremere when the Anarch Revolt occurred. This was an opportunity to turn against them. A powerful figure amongst them, Vistania, led her children in the revolt and slayed many Tremere before finally being granted their basic freedom from the Tremere. Granted, this wasn't every gargoyle, but a bulk of them did manage to use this opportunity to escape. Now, during the Victorian Age, gargoyles that were free tended to be very scarce, at least scarce in their identity. It was during this time that they developed their own discipline, visertica, the discipline of the gargoyles, and that many of them basically found that they could not exist within normal mortal society, even hide among it like many of the others. They had to find places to hide away from mortals. They looked ugly and disgusting to people. This means that they basically hid themselves away as best they could. Very few of them actually decided to take the difficult but possible journey to America, where they would find an even more alien and hostile environment than they had before in Europe. They were used to things in Europe. America was much different. In the modern nights, we find that the gargoyle population is actually booming. Not only are we finding more gargoyles are getting free, but many of the free gargoyles from the olden days are beginning to emerge from their various hiding places and join the Camarilla. They have found that the Camarilla is willing to accept the gargoyles into their ranks. Also, they've found that more of them are embracing from the population of mortals, and so more gargoyles are being born from that process. So the population is spiking. Now, gargoyles have an incredibly strong sense of community, and oftentimes they will form themselves into communal havens of a large group of numbers. These communal havens will, of course, give thanks to the prince, and they will oftentimes partition the prince in order to free gargoyles from the control of their Tremere slave masters that are still there. They don't always do this, though. They're also known to go after slave masters and basically tear them asunder with their claws, reducing them to nothing anyway, and then freeing the slaves that way. If a gargoyle is there without a community, it is often said that they will embrace others and have them basically create a communal haven in that manner. Now, a slave gargoyle will, of course, haven wherever their master says, whether it's in like an attic or basement or wherever they're basically being shoved. Free gargoyles tend to find incredibly high places up. They like things like belfries or towers because of their nature of their ability to fly. Granted that free gargoyles oftentimes act as muscle for other kindred because of their abilities, and therefore they sometimes trade that service for some kind of small haven of their own, usually a simple one without much furnishings, but it's something they can basically trade for their own work. Now, most gargoyles are not embraced. They're in fact cremated through powerful Tremere rituals, though the fact is, nowadays, the gargoyles themselves can embrace a mortal and make them into a gargoyle. The process of creating a gargoyle through the thaumaturgic rituals is incredibly painful and incredibly taxing. The combination of bloodlines which fight with each other and the magical powers makes it very difficult for the being there to get through with every sense of themselves attacked. And in fact, most of the time they have their basic memories and sense of self wiped out, making them a blank slate for the Tremere to manipulate. On the other hand, if a gargoyle embraces one, the process is not quite as debilitating. It still can be pretty terrible because of the nature of the magic and the dual bloodlines within them, but the result is that the embraced gargoyles oftentimes do retain a little bit of their past memories. Not as much, but they do have a sense of the self that they had before they came in as a gargoyle, even if it's a tiny bit. Though the occult process, regardless of the matter, does dissolve much of the past life of the mortal that is now becoming a gargoyle. Now, it's really hard to say what drives a gargoyle to embrace a mortal. It just seems like simple obsession. Most of them just get this feeling that they have to embrace someone, or that this person is one that they should embrace. Something that's really unexplainable as to why they would do it, but they do it. Something in their gut, so to say. Now, gargoyles are effectively horrific creatures made of stone. They almost appear that way. So they tend to have the same problems as Nosferatu do when it comes to appearance. They look ugly and have troubles with their appearance, and troubles reflecting upon dealing with other people because of said appearance. But they also suffer a second weakness. The fact is that they're susceptible to mind control. The reason why is this was built in by the Tremere. The Tremere wanted to make it easier for them to be dominated and used, so of course making them susceptible to mind control would be something you'd build into them. Now, in the 20th anniversary of Vampire Dark Age Edition, they have changed the weaknesses slightly. It is important to note this, that the mind control portion of it, the fact that they have weak minds to mind control, still exists. But the problems with their hideousness has been reduced. They don't quite have the same level of hideousness that a Nosferatu has anymore. It's a slightly less penalty now. It's more that they receive half dice if they're not dealing with someone they're intimately familiar with. Now, the gargoyles, the major difference you can see is that they've had two symbols over the ages. Of course, there's the Ankh symbol, which seems to be a universal symbol for vampires, which has been used, plus the symbol for earth within alchemy, basically put over the symbol of the Tremere, which is their other one. Both versions have been used over the ages, but in the current editions, in the 20th anniversary, they've cemented it as the earth elemental symbol over the Tremere as the kind of universal symbol for gargoyles, which I had shown earlier. So that's it for today. I introduced you to an interesting bloodline, which can only be called a bloodline of the Tremere now that it has evolved at this point in time. It's artificially made. They used blood of other vampires to create it. So really it's this amalgam of vampire blood, combined with their thaumaturgic magic to create something new. The gargoyle. A being that appears of stone, hideous, powerful, can fly. Interesting abilities that are powerful to it, but drive it away from mortal society. They were slaves to Tremere, and many of them have found their freedom. And now their population booms in mortal times. In these modern days, they have found that they can embrace and continue to try to free their brethren from Tremere control. Some remain enslaved. They have powers that make them formidable brawlers, basically hired muscle. And many vampires turn to them if they need some hired muscle. They're willing to do it for trades of something like a decent haven. hey, you know what? They're willing to be muscle for you if you can do something nice for them. Willing to get some work in. They just don't want to be under the thumb of someone, completely enslaved. They'll work for you, but not be a slave. Though. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.